Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Christina.
Thank you so much for taking the time right now and having a small chat about the results and about what it means to go through the SPEAKS team coaching framework audit. To me, it was an important milestone in the
Mhm.
development of the team coaching profession and at the same time around the entire ecosystem. And I have a bigger respect for you because you have been in this profession for a lot of years, but also been there to develop the team coaching competencies, to see them implemented and debated, and now also to see a framework being audited against them, even if they maybe there was not the point of auditing a framework back then. So I would be curious if you could share a bit from your perspective of what does this actually mean for the entire coaching profession, team coaching ecosystem, and however else you want to look at
I think there's three things that are really interesting
it.
about this particular project. First and foremost, it's the first time I'm aware of an organization that has an existing practice in coaching or in team coaching. Specifically in team coaching, I think it's especially notable that said, we are going to seek out working
Mm,
professional coaches to speak into what we are doing with our clients. And that two-way conversation, I think, is really important. I can think of a number of different situations where coaches said to organizations, I would love to help you develop your culture based on coaching concepts, or, I'm going to pitch you to base on, but if I understand it correctly, this one went the other way,
mm,
where Speaks said, you know what? We need some third party coaches that are not invested in our process, that will be objective, that will tell us this is good, this is not good. And we are open to seeing this happen. And then they found a really creative way to make that happen. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I think it validated the team coaching competency model
mm,
in some pretty significant ways, because what Speaks ended up doing in their professional situation mirrored, without exception, really, I think this is fair to say, and I'm going to say this to you as the auditor, but it mirrored the best practices that the competencies identified. And whether or not they were informed intentionally ahead of time to say, we're going to make sure that our model
mm.
focuses this way, or they just said this is our model and it happens to line up with which, well, okay, I'm seeing you nod there. That's actually encouraging to me, because here's a corporate professional team coaching model developed in the wild that matches what the ICF has said. Hey, based on a survey of team coaches, based on a job study, this is what's going on here. Well, you know what? It's validated now in a different way because it's coming to life in the wild. And then the third thing I think is really notable is that this well-known multinational
Mm.
entity partnered with an ICF chapter to get this done. I think that's a new and interesting way forward for chapters to function with coaching cultures in and around their locale. I don't, I've been a chapter president. That's one of the ways you and I know each other is from talking about chapter president stuff. I can't point to another chapter that has done a project quite like this, where the company came and said, "Hey, would you help us?" And the chapter said, "Absolutely." And it turns out these beautiful things happened as a result.
Mm.
So I'm very excited about the standard that's been set here.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And indeed, as a chapter president last year, when was a bit of a we had this conversation about the memorandum of understanding. We knew what would be the pillars, but this entire idea of constructing an audit directed and targeted to the team coaching framework has been something that emerged and sparked in the conversation with Armin, because I knew exactly that they were putting a lot of efforts and they would have been, they are actually, as far as I know, the first coaching platform that published a team coaching framework
Mm-hmm.
published, because there's at least another one that I know of that constructed their framework, but they've never went to market with it.
Mm-hmm.
So not only that they did it, they also went to market and they've tested it and they're providing it to customers. So um, I know that there is a layer in there of importance for them. How are we standing against the market standards, best practices, and so on? So I really appreciate the culture of learning and growth that
Yeah.
resides in Speaks, which
Yeah.
is nice to see that they're not only talking about it when they're trying to offer something to their client, but they're living it internally. So
Mm-hmm.
from this
And all of that
perspective,
lines up with more assurance that clients are getting what they came to coaching for in the first place, which
yeah,
I don't think we can put too much effort into ensuring that our clients are growing, are developing, are getting what they came for from those conversations. There's nothing but good things that happen there.
yeah, yeah. And let me just go one more step further and ask you something else. Like, what do you see here? Something that it's relevant for team coaching practitioners from the work that was done to audit this framework?
There's a couple of things that I think were really interesting. One is the language that was used in the framework.
Mm,
One of the things I hear from, well, I'm thinking of a chief coaching officer friend of mine at a large coaching organization, um, has talked about how they send their coaches through a mini MBA
mm,
because coaches don't talk like business leaders do. And it was fascinating to me to look at the language in the framework and say, you know what, this is a snapshot of the language that gets used inside of this large global company. And I remember thinking to myself, going through the framework, I wish I had other indicators of how language gets used in
mm.
other organizations like it's getting used in this particular organization. That was really interesting and illustrative of the differences between how we coach. We've all got other things that we like saying, and every
Biological safety,
company,
you mean?
yeah, stop it. Every company does as well, and that was a cool little mirror into what's going on inside of that organization. I hope we get more of those.
Me too. Don't
And,
worry, I'm
and
working
then
on trying to see who else would like to engage with us on such
okay,
projects.
good. Yeah, well, sign me up. Sign me up. I will help with that. The other thing that I think is really interesting is how these leaders inside of an organization went to school on what the coaches had to say.
Mm,
And this is
yeah.
a huge, I mean this as a huge compliment to Speaks, the Speaks team, Armin and all the folks that work with them. They really took seriously the input that was offered. It's one thing to do a project. You know, we've all got those moments where we went to some conference, we took a whole notebook full of notes, and then that notebook sits on the shelf
Mhm.
behind us. I don't think that's going to be the case here
No.
because there's a little there was a very different tone to what that's about. So again, hopefully we get more of those going forward.
Mm, mm. No, I had also this conversation. There's a separate interview with Daniel, and Daniel said one thing that stayed with me and resonates with what you're saying, and that is, he said, "Look, this has been an exercise that shows that you can actually put quantifiable measures behind things that are related to coaching, because at the end of the day, one thing that resides in that entire framework is how do you create a loop that shows the company that's the
Mhm.
buyer that the work that the supplier is doing constructs a way towards their objectives.
Mhm.
And I think that's what you're bringing up also here is this element of they have not engaged with the project just for the sake of doing it, but with a clear objective of how do we get better. So they've lived through their own offering to the customer by engaging with the clear perspective of how they grow, same as their clients.
That is one of my biggest critiques of the coaching world in general is we very often focus intently on how did my client grow? How did my client change? But there's a whole nother step to that in supplier situations, which is, did that growth actually address the business outcome
Yeah.
that caused the coaching engagement to be offered in the first place? And I think this project, this audit of the Speaks team coaching framework, is going to make that a lot more likely for Speaks clients moving forward. So there's my unsolicited commercial for Speaks team coaching coming out of this.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that we Oh, Jonathan, it was a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for putting in there some of your insights. And I also look forward to the article that you're going to be writing upon the competencies and connections.
I'm going to take a historical look. And I know that sounds boring, but it won't be. I'm going to look back to the beginning of the team coaching competencies and how this project is in some ways, logical extension of that work,
Mm,
but in other ways, surprising extension. Because
mm,
there's a couple of things as I've stood back and thought about that, that I wouldn't have predicted team coaching would end up at this place based on this project. And I want to
mm.
explore that in an upcoming article.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Look forward to that. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Christina.